Life is a journey, a winding road filled with challenges, uncertainty, and moments that test our strength. Welcome to The Way Home, a space where mind, body, and spirit come together in the pursuit of peace and purpose. The Way Home is more than a podcast. It's a path toward comfort, clarity, and connection. So wherever you are on your journey, take a deep breath, open your heart, and walk with us. This is The Way Home, presented by Plymouth Rock TV and Setting the Space.
All right, everybody, we're back, and with my wonderful co-host, Sharmin, and we are here.
My wonderful co-host, Chuck.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And do I wear hats normally? I don't
No.
normally, but so it says Plymouth Rock TV, so getting a little bit of housekeeping out of the way, we're changing our affiliation, we're branding, expanding, and we're going to be known as Octane Media.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Moving
Big
ahead.
things are happening.
So this is going to be like retro.
It's the relic.
You get it at,
I'm going to have
Savers.
to auction it off.
Savers or a thrift store, but then a thrift becomes an antique at some point, and it becomes valuable.
No, I think museum, Chuck.
Museum.
I
yeah.
think it's like part of what's going to be
the Smithsonian Institute for Television and Radio
Yeah.
History. This
Yeah.
will
So exciting
right
things.
next to the Bill Cosby sweaters and Archie Bunker chair at the Institute. So putting that out there for you to hear about, and of course our relationship. Sharmin started because of this great studio that we have at the Kingston Collection at the Setting the Space outlet, and it's the Plymouth Rock TV Octane Media Center, and we're thrilled about it. But when we got connected, it was because of you noticing and asking some questions, and then I was super impressed because I did some background checking on you. I hired my private investigator, Google.
Yeah, did you find some stuff?
Found the website.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit about like your website, because I think that your business sometimes gets lost in what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
and I go on there and it just makes you feel good. But tell me about like what how did you create it? What was your thought process?
So I had
with
this vision to start my business. I was thinking, each of us have gone through things, right? And when we're children, we're so free, most children, so free, so full of love for themselves and for the world, right? You're resilient, you're playful, you're creative. And that exists in all of us. And how far back do you have to go to find that version of yourself? And some people are lucky and they don't go through as many traumas as others. And maybe you exist in this moment, in that state of mind, resilient, playful, creative, free. But the likelihood is that is a memory that you have to think, when was the last time I felt like that? And how far back do you have to go? And when you get to that spot, you then recognize that that version of you, something altered. You altered your identity. And the way it works, metaphorically, because we love metaphors, if you think of a home, right? When you don't want the neighbors to see and you pull a shade down or you shut the door, right? And we do that within our souls, within ourselves. We, in essence, shut parts of ourselves down. Maybe to hide with whatever we, so that we can't be hurt again. Or maybe we have shame about what has happened, whatever it is, but we sort of close the windows and doors within us so that all of us is not visible. Right? Only the parts that we want you to see.
Right.
Right. And so over time, if things continuously happen, you're less and less of who you began as, right? This resilient, free child, creative and playful and open. And sometimes in life, we have these sort of moments of awareness where we say, like, who am I? And it's almost like you can't see anymore. And you're craving a healing. You're craving more. I want to be more of myself. Like, I don't even remember what I love anymore. I don't even remember what I want to do anymore. I don't remember what brings me joy. And so it's as if you open one window, kind of let some light in on what you've been hiding, right? Breathe some fresh air into those secluded spaces, right?
Yeah, good reference.
Thank you, yeah. So the idea is, in looking at what you've hidden, you heal it. And I always say, when you speak it, when you see it, you heal it. And so as children, we don't have tools. And so that's why we shut things down. And even some adults, we don't have tools. And that feels like the most natural, knee-jerk thing to do, is to just shut that part of me down. But the truth is when you heal it, you see it, you speak it, or even journal it, you allow light to get in on those spaces, you allow fresh air in on those spaces, and then you can reclaim all those pieces. You don't have to slowly lose a piece of you every time you're hurt. You know, you heal it and reclaim it back so that you are unapologetically free again and resilient and without shame and, you know, just owning the pieces of you because they are, your story is important. And it's what we were just talking about with our friend Paul. You know, our humanness is the most attractive thing about us.
And it even goes back, I mean, the story of Genesis in the Bible of Adam and Eve and living freely, and then the act of committing a sin or feeling guiltful or guilty, and then covering themselves up with the fig leaf in shame.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that begins the process of that cover up or that curtain of hiding ourselves.
That's right.
And being, I guess shame is the right word for it.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm wondering, as you were talking, I'm thinking, you know, a big problem in our universe is our reluctance to let children be children and just like let them be innocent and carry on. What do you think the first typical average time that an adult interferes with the kid's growth, or where they pull that curtain down? Because I think that if a kid left to their own devices wouldn't turn out the way us crazy mental adults are.
Oh, sure, they'd be free and playful and resilient.
What are some
forever.
of those early signs? Do you see any of that? Like, because you
Oh,
brought
yeah.
it all back.
Well, you know, I don't want to get too heavy now into sort of some of the things. I do know that 1 in 4 children, you know, are abused.
But let's just take an average kid, right?
Yeah.
Like even us saying, I mean, we sort of teach the magic out of them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, maybe they see an imaginary friend and we say, no, you're crazy.
Yeah.
Or not in those words.
Right.
But, or we say, stop daydreaming, pay attention, or something
Yeah.
like that. And we're desperate to try to make them adults.
Well, our generation
Right.
had an advantage in that we were bored a lot, right? And so we just had to find our own way, and we find that creativity, that imagination kind of filled up many hours of our days, and our kids don't have that now. So I don't think we can really say, because every child's childhood is going to be very unique to their own, you know, existence. I agree, though we don't foster creativity as often as we should. But, you know, my coaching began because it is the human experience to sort of block where we've been hurt. And we put this protective wall up around our heart, and we think it's so that we can't get hurt again. But the truth is, it isolates us, and it keeps love out. It keeps hurt away, but you can't get love in.
Is there any good function for that? Like, I mean, is there a...
I think there's a healing process that we go through where we need some space, and it might be fine temporarily, but you can't keep a wall up and be happy, right?
Yeah. Is it maybe keeping a permanent wall up the wrong idea? Maybe there are times like that we need to put some protective measures in,
right,
to help us heal.
I agree.
Like a Band-Aid, right?
I agree. It's a perfect example. Right. Yes. So like there's many tools, and if one of your tools is like, I need some introspection, I need some space, excellent. And then that will really serve you. But if you keep that wall up, no one's getting in, including the ones you love.
Yeah. So
right?
a million Band-Aids only makes it worse.
Million Band-Aids, right.
If you never took the Band-Aid off, we would be covered in Band-Aids.
Right.
We'd be mummies. You know? I mean, and daddies.
Yeah.
But I look back and because I think that those walls, everyone's got
Everybody
them.
does them. And so that my coaching started with, I thought, women, and then all of a sudden I was dealing with men. And then, you know, and I did kids and teens and boys and girls, and all of that was great. And then it went to relationships. And I was, you know, doing relationship counseling and coaching and marriages. And that was eye-opening. Because what I recognized in that study is that the conflicts that we face, like no relationship is good because it's without problems. Every relationship has problems. But it's how you try to resolve them or your lack of trying to resolve them. You come into relationships with your own narratives. And if you don't heal that, it inadvertently, like your relationship becomes the container for all of your baggage.
Right. Yeah.
Or your loved one becomes the container to hold your baggage.
Yeah. And I think it's I go back to that book, if you remember, I think it was John Gray, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
Yeah.
And it seemed like a millennia ago that something like that would come out because it was identifying the differences between,
because it was the first time we realized how wired differently we were.
You know, we referenced a conversation we were having earlier with a friend that stopped by, and we were talking about how we're so the same, you know, in terms of being
our
human
souls,
beings,
our needs, our wants, our
no
fear,
matter if
our
you're black
love.
or white,
That's
or
right.
male or female, but then we are uniquely different, every
Wired
individual
different.
person.
Yes.
So we have this dichotomy of, we're all human beings, but we're so remarkably special and unique and different.
Yeah.
But the similarities are unique when it comes to men and women.
Yes.
And I wonder how that allows you to coach.
Well, yeah.
And how different are we?
So different. And there are, again, the common ground, for example, if you are focused on the past, then you're controlled by fear. That's unique to both of us. If you're focused on the future, then you're controlled by anxiety. If you're focused on other people's opinions, then those people control you, right? That is what we have in common. Or best scenario, if you're focused on yourself, then you have peace.
Yeah.
Right? So that's unique. I mean, not unique, but that's similar. But how we're different is women really need to feel emotionally safe and physically safe to have intimacy. Right? And I don't even just mean physical intimacy. I just mean like that emotional deep connection, but really both. You know, a lot of men will fester in their resentment that maybe the relationship over the course of time, you know, it's not as romantic as it used to be, and, you know, it's not as spicy or whatever in that regard, and they blame the wife. But the environment is created by men. What environment are you providing, right? Does she feel physically safe and emotionally safe? And if not, intimacy will fade.
So let me play devil's advocate here in a way that you had the feminist movement that came along that said women need to be out in the workforce and providing themselves, and then the lines get blurred of the hunter and gatherer and the nurturer and all these things that we have as innate human qualities. Yeah. That it is confusing for people. Like,
it's very confusing.
Let's say a house where the woman makes all the money and the man is home taking care of the children. Does those needs reverse? Yeah. Where the man wants to feel safe and feel like he's being like it. And I'm not. It's an interesting quandary.
It is.
To think of our culture now.
So it isn't the typical scenario. As good as we are, right? 70% of divorces are initiated by women. And this is just, you know, statistically speaking, right? So it's still kind of, and it's 90%, that it goes up to 90% if in that couple, they're both college educated. Again, to your point, that's kind of assuming they're both working. What does that look like? You know, a lot of people are in scenarios where they're working full time, but maybe they grew up in a house, you know, the 50s sort of model, where the woman cooks and cleans. And you don't want to speak in generalities. It's not fair, but if this is the statistics, this is why. This is speaking to the greater whole of people. There are unique scenarios, of course, but women are expected to work like they have no children and parent like they have no job. And that's difficult, right?
And and you know, you wonder, again, devil's advocate, and you know me, a lot of things will swirl through my brain as each thought comes in, but the how culture plays a role too, in the sense of couples get married, especially maybe the boomers coming out of World War II. They got married because it was that time.
Yeah, right.
Less so of having a good foundation with another person.
Right.
They just, whoever was in your circle at that point who would look like they could be a good wife and have babies, they were going to be the one you picked.
Just broad hips.
And the birthing hips,
right,
whatever.
Yeah.
And then you have a relationship that really is fundamentally doesn't have good bones to it, a good foundation.
Sure.
Right? Because you can give me babies and I will give you a home to have, raise those children, and that's what you did.
So we're looking at happiness. Like, that's a great scenario, but can you find happiness there? Maybe. Here's how, right? Because ultimately, there's going to be a lot of different scenarios in homes, and you can't be happy unless everybody feels seen and heard. Women especially need that. Now, again, not to say that men don't deserve the same, and they deserve to feel respected, so on and so forth. But if we're looking at statistics, right, if we're looking at homes, that people are, and men often think that love is performative, meaning that it's like a transactional sort of marriage. Like, I will go to work, I will pay the bills, I will be faithful, and I won't do anything wrong, and that's enough. And it's not enough. Do you love your wife? Yes. Okay, great. But does she feel loved? Can you answer that question? Not you, but can, a lot of people think like that's enough on paper. I've done what I need to do and I love my wife. Does she feel loved? And what does that mean? Well, you have to remain a student in your marriage. If you have stopped learning and growing together, your marriage will fail. And you should say something to your partner, something like, teach me what it feels like, or teach me what you need to feel loved. I am committed to learning.
And I think that one of the things that stuck out to me was you hear of a marriage and it's 50-50, and really the turnaround for me was when I heard somebody say it's not 50-50, it's 100%, 100%.
I love that. Yes.
And like it's number one, being comfortable in loving yourself first. Like before you can offer love to somebody else, you have to love yourself, which is I think probably one of the most difficult obstacles to overcome, because people don't love themselves and they have their own walls up.
We've talked about this in other shows. It's so important.
So it's hard to even connect with somebody else when you're not at your best.
Yeah, it is.
Because then you're not even hearing what the other person's going through.
Excellent point.
Because you're going through something of your own making. I don't know if that's...
And that's why relationships are hard. Relationships are mirrors, right? So your partner is holding up this mirror saying, this is what you are. And you might be trying to hide from it, just like that analogy in the beginning. You're trying to shut down parts of yourself so you can't see what's the imperfect parts of me, but a spouse does or a partner does.
Yeah.
And they hold that mirror up and they say to you, either fix it or we're not any good. And that's the self-awareness that's required. And I talk often about, you got to reflect. You got to do that reflection. And you got to do that inner work, because that's where it all begins and ends. Like, you can't love your partner if you don't love yourself. So you got to realize that self-awareness
or anybody, not
or
just
anybody,
your partner.
Right.
Yeah,
or anybody fully, right. So that self-awareness is really understanding the greatest battle you will ever fight is within.
Yeah.
And it's not outside, and it's not blaming this or that or the circumstance. It's like getting good with yourself and doing that work. Yeah.
So you in your practice, right? You primarily have dealt with women. Are you?
And
not
you're
anymore.
Dealing
with more men now.
Yeah, and couples.
I'm probably the most public of XY chromosomes out there that is being serviced by your skills. But what's the percentage now? Do you feel comfortable being in the head of a guy? I mean,
I do.
Yeah.
I do, because I know that it's you know what it is? It's like the results are, they're immediate.
Yeah.
So when I work with a man and I'm helping him look at his thoughts, you realize just being accountable, I think men get how many times did your wife come to you with her hurt feelings and she was trying to share with you her difficult emotions? And I don't know how you handle that. But many men roll their eyes, they get defensive, and they walk away. And they don't do this because they're terrible people, right? They do this because they've never been taught emotional regulation. And in fact, a lot of men, especially men, are emotionally avoidant. And that just means they were likely neglected to some extent in their childhood. Maybe their needs were met, but that emotional support, maybe that wasn't there.
Yeah.
And it sort of makes them emotionally avoidant, right? Where they seek isolation, they seek alone time, they, whatever, and there's a discomfort.
There's a great video, and I'm going to find this, and I might insert it here. Yeah. But it's this, because I had this problem as a guy. You want to be the one that fixes everybody's problems, right? So if my wife would come to me with a problem that had what appeared to me to be an obvious solution, and she had to sit me down at one point. She's like, I don't want a solution. Mm-hmm. Right? But so the funny video is that this girl is talking to her husband, and she's like, you just please listen to my problems.
This pressure, and sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless, and I don't know if it's going to stop. That's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
No, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. Ow. If you would just...
Don't...
Yeah.
And she's like, I come home and I have a headache every single day from my job. And, it's like a throbbing pain. Camera pulls out. She's got a giant nail sticking out of her head. And he's like, well, let me kind of give you a little advice. And she's like,
I don't want advice.
Just listen to me. And he's like, but
there's something.
just pull. And it was a commentary on like the guy seeing the obvious pain that she's going through. And,
yeah.
Like, let's pull that nail out of the side of your head.
Right.
And she's just like, no, that's not the,
yeah.
you're just not getting me.
Yeah, you're just, yeah.
And maybe it was made for the joke for somebody like me. But it's somewhat true, because I remember being frustrated, like, oh my God, just...
Well, talking about feelings is definitely coming, like finding a quick bit of advice and fix that is it's transactional. And
a guy that goes to work, and that's what they have to do all day,
right.
is solve problems,
right?
And so when they get home, they don't necessarily want to not help the people that mean the most to them.
It's true.
But sometimes the problem isn't the situation, it's how you feel about it and just processing that, which I think is the lesson I learned, at least.
It is. And it's like, so thoughts lead to behaviors, right? And if going back, conflict are really, oh God, this is a whole thing. Okay. Conflicts are going to happen. We know this because life you're never going to be without problems. So when the conflicts arise, you have to understand they are really formed from unspoken emotion, like emotions that you never dealt with, whether they're your own or as something that you share together. So these conflicts come up about these emotions. And when you go to deal with it as a couple, oftentimes one partner or the other has a narrative that they're attaching to it. Let me give you a real life example. I say, you never listen to me. You hear, imagine we're married, you hear, she thinks I'm a terrible husband. When all I said is you didn't listen to me. And all I really want you to do is sit here and listen. But your thought is leading you to the narrative of I'm a terrible husband, which leads to a feeling of shame. Right?
I'll take the spiral even a step further, because even for you to have to say, listen, you then develop some resentment of like, why should I have to say listen? Why should I have to tell him to listen to me?
Yes. So that's a common complaint in my couples therapy. Yes. Women stop repeating themselves at a certain point, and it's not because they stop having things to say, right? Yeah. They just know that no one's listening. Because listening isn't nodding and da-da-da. It's like, are you seeking to understand where I'm coming from? That's different than listening. Yeah. And that's what they're getting at.
There was some advice that I got, and I don't know if it was good or not, and I'm probably guessing it wasn't, but it was, rather than, you would always get this advice like never go to bed angry or something like that. But a lot of times what you're angry about is such a nothing thing that has nothing to do with your spouse. Yeah. It just could be you're in a bad mood, or it's just your own insecurity, something that annoyed you. Don't sweat the small stuff kind of thing. And oftentimes you pick your battles, if that's another cliche that's out there, and I would go to bed angry, knowing full well that tomorrow I'll forget all about this, because I just know myself, right? Whereas then your partner resents that, because then they're carrying that all whatever. Yeah. And it's a hard balance, because you don't want to fight at every turn. No. And like, we're going to talk about this because then life is too complicated.
Let me pause you there. So I think that is a perception that we need to shift. A lot of times, men think when women come to them with difficult emotions that it's an attack or that they want to fight, right? In fact, it's an opportunity. When they stop coming to you, when they give you the silent treatment, it is far those are big. That is the loudest cry. That is the one you should be worried about. When they come to you, that is not an attack. That is an opportunity. And I think if you see it as that, it's a really caring thing to do, to come to somebody.
Yeah.
And if it's coming off as anger or frustration, really that is only because there are more vulnerable. Remember, I was telling you, so anger or frustration, any of those negative sort of irritable emotions are covers. They are masks for the vulnerable emotions. So when they don't feel seen or heard or appreciated, it will often come out as frustration or criticism in you. But again, going back to what I was saying about the thoughts and the narrative and whatever. So if you don't listen to me, happens, and then you hear I'm a bad husband, and then you're left with shame, and your worthiness wounds are there, and rejection wounds are triggered, and all these things, right? Try to catch the thought process in action, because we are fully capable at all times of witnessing what we're thinking about, and try to catch it and shift it and say, maybe she actually just needs me to listen.
Right, yeah.
And see what happens.
You brought up earlier the whole transactional kind of thing where, and I think couples do this all the time, we're all guilty of it, I'm guilty of it, where you do something in expectation of something else. Like I should get credit for something. And even going back in the wisdom in the Bible of like, you pray in silence and quiet, and you don't let other people in on that as like some sort of self-righteousness or something, and then you do charity in private too, to help somebody with no expectation of something.
A thank you or whatever, right?
So when a guy will say, okay, maybe they found some article, is Cosmo really a thing anymore? I don't know.
But I know what you mean. Yeah,
you go on how to be a better husband, and it says do the dishes and do this and do that, and then you still feel like nothing changed because of that. And then there is hidden resentment where I'm doing all these things, they're not going noticed, but you shouldn't do them for being noticed. You should do it because both people are 100% committed.
You brought me to another good point. I love that. Yes. And so a lot of times too, because men think that they are fully living up to their expectations by going to work, coming home, and staying faithful. They think that that is it, right? But do you feel loved? That's the question. Come back to that. But a lot of men see the home as the woman's domain. So if that's true, you hear things like, maybe they've done the dishes, once, and they think that they get a thank you. It is your shared home, and there's got to be a shared feeling. Or there's some men that say, or women feel the need to say, can you help with the kids? They're your kids.
And I'll play the guy here, is that even if a guy's living in that home by himself, doesn't care about the dishes. So that point hits home of like it is the woman's house, and asking for a friend, not for me, but like if I was in the house and we were married or something, and you were asking me my opinions on curtains or something, and I'm like, get whatever you want. Is that dismissing your caring for the curtains, or is that me being like, look, this is your world, and I'm here to provide for you, and I don't care what the curtains are? But did you just get dismissed by me saying that? Like, a guy's trying to be as understanding, like, do whatever you want, darling. But is that coming off like I don't care about you? Would you rather have me say, you know what, let's really go out and select some curtains? Then the wife goes, that's not genuine. He's never in a million years interested in. Like, do you see what I mean?
I do.
It goes back and forth.
Yeah, it's not black or white. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you are not a designer at heart, and I'm asking you that question, I'm just asking for your, like, I want to feel connected to you while I make this decision.
What's the best way to answer that question?
Best way to answer that question, it would just be, well, it's imagining it's you, right? And like you really don't care and you're trying to be careful. The best way to answer it is to say, oh, thanks for asking me. First of all, like you want to be included, right? And be like, I don't know. I think blue, it'd be nice, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately you have the eye for design and I trust your instincts. My input is blah, blah, blah. So you're giving her the compliment.
But doesn't that happen once?
Yeah.
And then moving ahead, if that was the case every single time, it almost becomes, and that's, I guess, is where the longevity of a marriage comes in.
You are being looped in, then it's a thank you. It's a being grateful that you're being looped in, and it's just acknowledging she doesn't really need your opinion. Like, does this picture look good here? I mean,
Yeah.
she's just, connection is hard to come by. The hours, there are not enough hours in the day. And between jobs, if you're both working or, if the woman is at home or the man's at home, I mean, regardless, whether you are getting paid for the work or you're doing all the behind the scenes stuff, there aren't a lot of times to connect. And so if you're using little moments to try to just kind of keep it there, I mean, you have to. So Jordan Peterson, we both share an appreciation and respect for him. He's a psychologist, I think. Is he a psychologist?
He's a clinical psychologist, yeah.
And I think he's so smart. And he says your relationships are going to fall apart if you don't have trust. If a woman does not trust the relationship, does not feel safe, right? And so looking at most relationships, they do, and this is even, okay, we're going to go right back to Jordan Peterson, because first I want to say, I was told this by my mom when I got married. I think I've mentioned this to you before. And she said, Charm, I want you to understand that marriage is like the 4 seasons. And I was like, okay, all right, tell me more. She said, when you meet, it's going to be like summer. It's hot, it's perfect, it's beautiful. When you've been together a little while, it will shift from summer to fall. And fall is still beautiful, but it's a little cooler, right? Mm-hmm. And then after you've been together even longer, sometimes you find yourself in a barren winter, and it's cold, and it's desolate, and it's lonely.
Right.
But if you hang on, soon it will be spring again. Boom.
Yep.
Personally, I've seen many seasons, right? And that is normal. You're never going to find that point in a relationship where you're without problems.
Yeah.
But it's recognizing kind of along the way where you can fix it, where you fell off, were you being transactional and performative, and did you think you were helping by doing her dishes? Like, that's insanity, but it's so common.
And it's beautiful to hear somebody who's been married 75 years at their party, and they talk about all of the good and bad times.
Right.
Because if it was perfect the whole time, then it
Never.
really wasn't real.
No.
Because that's not a realistic
Life
thing.
isn't measured on the perfect moments.
Well, and because we're certainly different people,
Yeah.
both mentally and anatomically, we're literally, they say every 7 years, we've completely shed all of ourselves.
You change a
and
lot.
We're literally a different body.
it's
Like, this
perfect.
body was not the one that was born.
No.
It's a completely new thing. So
Yeah.
we're changing as people.
Yeah.
And,
But you either grow together or you grow apart.
Yeah.
Right? You are supposed to be evolving. And
Or falling in love all over again with whoever you're
you
with.
choose them again and
Yeah.
again and again.
Over and over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is a choice. You have that choice. And let them know that you're choosing them. Be the student that is ever learning and evolving and growing in the relationship. When you are in the passenger seat of your marriage, right? You can't be in the passenger seat and drive.
Yeah.
So if it crashes, don't be surprised.
Well, and it's a good even, to objectively to look back, look outside, even to your relationship with your kids, as an example of how you would view your spouse, is that you can get into a pattern of like remembering what they were like when they were sweet and 9 years old,
Yeah.
and they wanted to be with you and everything, and then thinking that they've changed because they're 19 and don't want to be around you and they don't want anything to do with you, knowing full well that they're going through their own life journey. But there is, and that's a drastic version, seeing a kid go from toddler to adolescence to teenager to young adult.
But that's a great analogy,
But
though. But we do it too.
I look at pictures of myself bringing my daughter home from the hospital. I don't know how they let me out of the hospital with that child.
Because you
I was
look like
so
a baby
young.
yourself.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I know I'm a completely different person.
Yeah.
But I was married to the same person I'm married to now, and it's like, but we've been like
Yeah.
so different.
Yeah.
And you grow and you change and evolve and
Right. And sometimes things fall apart along the way.
Yeah.
But they can, if you're both committed to the relationship, because we can get focused on externally goals and things outside the marriage.
Yeah.
And get a little bit on autopilot, right? And if you notice you're disconnected, and if you notice things aren't the same, like your teenager, if you're not showing up the same in your marriage. For example, if you didn't show up to work, but you said, I love my job, you'd still get fired. You've got to do your job.
Right.
You got to show up.
Yep.
And you got to do that reflection, like, how am I showing up? And then if you see that your spouse is not showing up in the same way, and this is true for like any relationship, if you're in a dating situation, like people change. You know, you start in the honeymoon period and everybody's all their shiny best. And even the emotionally avoidant people, they show up and they love it in the beginning because there's no high stakes. But once you're committed and once there's a lot to lose, those avoidants, they can't handle turbulent emotions. Like they avoid them. We don't want to touch them. And what happens if you're doing that, the partner isn't being seen or heard, you're going to have disconnection. Intimacy is going to go away, right? And as much as the man wants to sit around and resent her for it, what are you doing? Is the environment safe for her? Does she feel emotionally safe? Does she feel physically safe? Like, there's a part that we play. And it's so interesting. You can grow together or you can grow apart. There's so much more we need to say, but I think we need to take a break.
Yeah, so let's do that and ponder some of these things, and maybe I'll text my wife and make sure everything is...
see if she feels loved.
See if she feels loved, and then we'll come back with more of The Way Home. So hang with us. We'll be right back.